It's loading up right now. Letting everyone in.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started in just a minute. Bear with us as we let everyone in. We'll see you shortly. Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Joel Whitney. It's nice to be with you here in the summer heat. I am actually not in New York right now, but normally I'm in Brooklyn, and greetings from my normal spot and from California at the moment. We're so excited to be welcoming Mary Dixie Carter for her debut novel, The Photographer. She'll be in conversation with Kimberly McCreight, and we can't wait to get started with that. Shakespeare was a genre writer down the line, never wrote anything outside his genre. He was not an innovator because it's really quite a recent idea that the best books have no genre. That's what Mary Bly, also known as Eloisa James, said when she came out as a known Shakespeare scholar by day and a secret romance writer by night. She came out because her elderly father, Robert Bly the poet, was starting to forget who knew and who didn't know. And they were all sick of the subterfuge. We get to do so-called genre fiction here once in a while at the library, and we love it when we can. We know that we have so many fans of thrillers and mystery and other kinds of genre so-called writing, and we couldn't be more excited to welcome our neighborhood friend, Mary Dixie Carter, with this debut that Publishers Weekly called simply Carter's Outstanding Debut. We are going to live stream tonight's event, and before we jump in, I just wanted to let you know that the Arts and Culture Department is called BPL Presents, and that is also our handle on social media if you want to follow us for upcoming concerts on the plaza, our unique offering Cinema Ephemera, where we project cool videos and ephemera on the facade of the Grand Army Plaza building, and much more, including literary conversations like this. So without further ado, Mary Dixie Carter's writing has appeared in Time, The Economist, the San Francisco Chronicle, the Chicago Tribune, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the New York Sun, the New York Observer, and other print and online publications. She worked at the Observer for 5 years, where she served as the publishing director. In addition to writing, she also has a background as a professional actor. Mary Dixie graduated from Harvard College with an honors degree in English literature and holds an MFA in creative writing from the New School. She lives in Brooklyn with her husband and 2 young children, and The Photographer is her first novel. Kimberly McCreight's novel, Reconstructing Amelia, has been optioned by HBO and Nicole Kidman's Blossom Films, and A Good Marriage is coming from Amazon and Blossom Films. McCreight is also author of the New York Times bestselling young adult trilogy, The Outliers, which include The Outliers, The Scattering, and The Collide, optioned for film by Lionsgate and Reese Witherspoon's Pacific Standard. She attended Vassar College and graduated cum laude from the University of Pennsylvania Law School. She also lives in Brooklyn. Will you please welcome our 2 panelists?
Hello.
You're muted still, Kimberly.
All right, that was not a good start to my Q&A. I will get better. Mary, I'm so excited to be here with you. Your book is fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
And so welcome to the wonderful world of thriller writing. So I guess my first question, because your background is in journalism and also acting and a lot of other things, did you always know that you wanted to write fiction? Was this something you kind of like the secret dream you had, or like how did you arrive at the space? And then specifically, how did you arrive at writing, a mystery or a thriller? I don't really know the difference between those words, to be quite honest, but however you would categorize your novel, did you know that was what you wanted to do, or were you just really looking to write a book and that's how it ended up turning out?
Well, the first part of your question, I always enjoyed writing. I always was writing something or other, even when I wasn't pursuing it professionally, even when I was acting, I was still enjoyed writing. And then I went to work at the New York Observer, and I was a journalist for a number of years. And I was writing, obviously, a different kind of writing. But around the time I got pregnant with my first child, I started writing a novel. And I think it was like, I just knew I needed to write that novel. Now, that novel is not The Photographer. That novel was not published, but I still think it's good. And it got me started writing novels. And then I wrote the second novel, which is The Photographer. And I did not, so the second part of your question is, I didn't set out to write a thriller mystery. I just set out to write this story. And then everyone else said it was a thriller. And so I was like, oh, great. But I set out to write the story from the point of view of this woman, Delta Dawn. And actually, I can tell you how I got the idea and how I got started writing this book, which is I hired a photographer myself to take pictures of my two children a few years back. And when I got the pictures back, they were beautiful, but my children's eyes in the photos were cobalt blue, and they're not in real life. And I said to the photographer, I'd like for my children's eyes to be their real color. And she said, there is no real color. And I was so intrigued by that point of view. And like that point of view, applying it to photography, but also that point of view, applying it to life. And this character, Delta Dawn, is a first-person narrator. She really takes that point of view to an extreme, and she changes photos the way she thinks the photo should look, and totally finds it irrelevant what the image actually was in the first place. And she also then does that in life too. She feels that she can alter her life and make her life look the way she thinks it ought to look. So that's how I got started on it.
I mean, it's riveting. I mean, the story about the blue eyes is also terrifying.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you took that much better than I would have. I got a restraining order. That's really terrifying. Maybe I've written too many mysteries. But I think that I think what you said about really, did you set out to write a thriller, is really telling. And I think that's true for a lot of people who end up writing kind of in this space, is that you really just set out to write a book. And a lot of where it falls, particularly I think if your book is character driven, is just a bit determined by how you're going to get that book in the right reader's hands. Like, and that is a bit about, you know, the publishing industry and libraries, and kind of how are readers going to reach it. So I think that's really interesting. And also really interesting that you kind of started with this personal experience as your inspiration. And so I think that leads next for me to a craft question, which is, and I love asking writers, other writers about craft, because it makes you feel slightly less alone in the process. But so are you an outliner or a pantser? And I don't know if you've heard that term, but fly by the seat of your pants for anybody listening who hasn't. So like, you had your inspiration and did you work out the story first, or did you just sit down and start writing?
In this case, I did not. I did not work out the story first. And I think it was the right decision for this particular book, which I wanted to allow Delta Dawn's voice to lead me and tell me where to go. And I didn't want to impose anything on that. And so I was surprised by what was happening throughout the story. And then even at the very, very end, I was surprised, like I wrote the end, and then for anyone who's read it, then there's another like little extra chapter. And that little extra chapter, I was like, oh, now I know what's going to happen. And then I wrote that extra chapter. And that was all, as I was going along, I allowed Delta to sort of tell me what it should be. I'm curious, where do you fall? Do you fall in the outline category or the pantser category?
Well, what's funny about that question that I just asked, which made it seem like it was for you, it's really for me, so I can try to make my process better. That's really why I'm like always like, just kind of stealing ideas from other writers. So, I fall solidly in the pantser category, so I absolutely don't outline. But I guess, which leads to my follow-up question for you, because I don't outline and my plots are very complex, it means that the bulk of my work is in revision. But it sounds like actually that you didn't, it sounds like some things came as a surprise as you learned about the character, but that did you find that a lot of the heavy lifting was in revision, or did you really feel like it kind of just was there, like the real the crux of it, or the bulk of it once you were finished?
So I would say that the arc of the story was there. That did not change very much, but I did write a lot of stuff that was bad and that I threw out. And so there were tons of pages that I wrote that did not make it into the book and that I realized were wrong for one reason or another. So, yes, the revision process there's a lot of heavy lifting. But in this particular case, I found that arc pretty early on.
And given that because you were kind of guided by character, did you find that there were a lot of surprises for you? It sounds like some things surprised you, but did you, as it evolved, did it end up being a different book than what you thought it was going to be when you started out?
That's a good question. It in some ways it ended up being a different book. Delta Dawn, I didn't set out, like a lot of people are really kind of horrified by this character, and I did not set out to make her like a horrifying character. And I do hope that readers have compassion for her and empathize with her, as much as I feel like the Straubs, the couple that so the opening of the book, she's this photographer, for anyone who hasn't read it. She takes pictures of wealthy New Yorkers and their children. And at the opening of the book, she goes to the home of Amelia and Fritz Straub to take pictures of their daughter's birthday party. And she falls in love with this family and she becomes obsessed with this family. And she thinks the family is the end all and be all. She thinks they're so glamorous and they're educated and they're everything that she wishes she was. Now the family's not actually so wonderful. And I think the reader will see that as they go along. They're kind of entitled and they're arrogant and there's a lot wrong with this family, but Delta doesn't see that or know it. She thinks they're perfect. So I don't know if I've totally answered your question, but this is how I answered your question, is that the Straubs, I actually didn't know how I felt about them until the end, because at the beginning, I wasn't intentionally making them into this sort of entitled, arrogant, privileged couple. They were just this family, like a nice family. And then that kind of it kept growing, that side of them, that very unattractive kind of side of them. So that was something that I didn't know was going to be there.
That's really interesting. To me, that's like the best part about writing, is the things that surprise you, that you're, in it and like, oh, it's just kind of the magic of it. I also think what you said is interesting, that when readers see your characters, it's like a kind of gift, but also a surprise when they see your characters differently than you do. See them as unlikely. You're like, wait, but I like that person. I that person, or I empathize with that person. I mean, to some extent, to write them, you have to empathize with all of them, right?
Right. Yeah, that's true. You do have to. So, but some people really have a negative feelings about Delta, more so than I intended in writing Delta.
Right. Well, that I think is not an unheard of thing with female tough female characters, I feel like sometimes that has a tendency to happen. So can you talk a little bit about, I know you were an actress and that or actor, and that is obviously a really interesting career, and about kind of creating a false impression or an unreal impression of something. And I guess I'm curious about how doing that, how it ties, either just doing that as a career or actually inhabiting those characters, how it relates to your work as a writer.
So it really ties in so well. Like the skills that you use as an actor, I feel like they're so similar to the skills that I use as a writer. The muscles are kind of the same. And in this case, because it's in first person, I really did try to get into the mind and the body of this character. And that's what I would do when I was acting. I was mainly acting on stage. So I would really try to get into, like, find this character in my body and find, like, what is she seeing? What does she want? And the writing, I kind of almost act it out as I'm sitting at the computer, like. And I imagine a lot of writers, well, you can tell me, a lot of writers probably do some of that. They may not call it acting, that kind of like getting, like, finding how the person holds their hand and actually doing it while you're sitting at the computer. Do you do any of that? Do you know what I'm talking about? And do you approach writing that way at all?
I have no idea what you're talking about now. I'm just kidding. Yes, it probably looks a little bit different for me in terms of the physicality of it, but I definitely think I've never acted myself, so I don't know whether or not it's the same, would be the same for me, but for sure it's inhabiting somebody else's skin. I actually see it like it plays out like a movie, but I'm in the point of view of whatever character I'm writing in.
Right.
And so I kind of see it visually, and then you have to rewind it and try it again whatever I did just didn't work. And so,
Yeah.
but I do think that idea of living in somebody's skin, particularly if you're writing from multiple points of view or from the point of view of a particular character, you really do have to inhabit them that way.
Yeah.
And feel what it would feel like to lean against a wall if you were them, and all those things, so you can get those details right. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So I think it has had a big effect on my writing. And also, I think it has, I tend to write in a sort of lean way, and that may be because I've read a lot of plays. And in fact, like, so early on, I probably read more plays than I read novels, and was in a lot of plays, and I read a lot of plays. So the kind of play structure is in my bones. And so that may be why I write in a kind of spare or lean way.
And so for you, this is kind of another craft question, but what was the toughest part? I guess it's a two-part question. What was the hardest part about writing this book? And then my broader question is, what's the hardest part for you of writing in general? I feel like people have the bit they think is the hardest. For some people it's the beginning, for some people it's the end. I think it really varies. So I'd be curious, what you had written another book before this one, like what particular challenge, and I do feel like each book presents its own challenge.
Yeah, it does.
Something different.
Well, for me, the hardest part is finishing it. Definitely finishing it, and just having the kind of the will to finish it, and believing that it's good enough, that it merits my time and energy, and the amount of time that it actually takes to finish it. And in this case, the hard part for me was, well, this goes a little bit back to my acting background, which is that the dialogue comes easiest for me. So I tend to write the dialogue first, and the whole spine of it would have like tons of dialogue in it, and not as much setting the scene of like what is the physical world around these people. So those details, I go back and fill in and force myself to do that. And whereas the dialogue kind of just rolls more easily for me.
Yeah, no, that actually makes complete sense. And I have to say I kind of agree. I think if you're inhabiting the characters in that way, it makes sense. The dialogue, right? You know, you're really feeling them, so that piece comes more naturally.
Do you have does the dialogue lead you, or is it something else that leads you when you're writing?
You know, I think it's really what's leading me. I really just try to lead in scene by scene. I try to really just keep it moment by moment, which I think
Yeah.
you're saying too. You're just leading with the dialogue, but I think I really just try to keep it micro. And I think when
Yeah.
you don't have an outline to go by, that's really important. Otherwise, as you said, it's hard to fake panic.
Yeah.
So I think just keeping it small and trying to remember overall the main theme, like what story I was trying to tell
Yeah.
when you started, I
Yeah.
think helps you stay on track a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So you have the best names for characters in your book, like on the planet. I mean, it's Fritz Straub, and and the wife's first name?
Amelia Straub.
I mean, like they couldn't be. I mean, you and I are both from Brooklyn. I just couldn't be more. It couldn't be more Park Slope if you made it up. It's just perfect. So and also, you know, Delta Dawn also. I mean, just the names are great. And so I just wonder whether or not you have any particular trick to coming up with those.
Well, so Delta Dawn, the song Delta Dawn, I don't know if you're familiar with it,
Wow.
but there's a Tanya Tucker song, Delta Dawn, and the lyrics to that song have sort of like a resonance. And I feel like the character in that song and this character share certain qualities. And so that was the main reason that I ended up choosing Delta Dawn. But the other reason is, so I have a very Southern name and a double name, Mary Dixie Carter, and I've lived mainly in New York and in Los Angeles, though my mom was from Tennessee. So my name has always marked me as being slightly different, and like people take note of my name, and I kind of wanted that for Delta Dawn. I wanted her name to make her a little bit of an outsider. And there are a lot of things that make her an outsider in this book, but her name is one more thing that makes her an outsider.
It's just the best. It's the best. So I wonder whether or not, we talked a little bit about this, about you having written, you know, the other book and then this one. I guess I have a side question, which is, would you revisit, or are you going to revisit the first book?
That's a good question. You know, I might at some point. I'm not going to do it right away, but at some point I might. I sort of like don't really want to read it at this particular moment, but I do feel like that it has some merit and that it has an audience, and so eventually I'm sure I'll go back to it.
If it makes you feel any better, I had 5 unpublished ones before I sold my first, and mine were all really terrible. So I would not revisit mine.
So there's no way you'll go back?
There's no way I go back. So I can I can relate to the notion of not necessarily wanting to, for whatever, you know, I'm not saying your other one isn't fantastic, but I get not necessarily wanting, sometimes
wanting to read it. It's like, just put it out of my mind for a moment.
Yeah, no, exactly. Sometimes the road ahead is a better looking road. Right? I mean, because it's like, it's true. I think that so there are some great books that don't get published and don't have homes. Sometimes books don't get published, and there's a reason. They don't. It's like a little. So you know, definitely they should stay buried probably someplace. So I guess related to that, kind of your own trajectory. Well, how long, like from the first book to the second book, did you write the first book and then immediately start writing the next one, or was there a gap in between them?
There was a little bit of a gap in between. I mean, I was sort of revising that first book and seeing if I could figure out a way to make it work. And I kept kind of going back to it until I like really was made the decision, okay, move on. I'm going to move on for now. And the second book, so that story that I told you of with the photographer and the pictures of my children, that actually took place probably 2 years before I started writing the book. It wasn't like that happened and the next day I started writing it, but I did write a few notes. And it was just on my computer, and it was maybe one scene, like 5 pages, about this woman and this situation and the photographer and the family. And those 5 pages didn't make it in, but it was the kind of concept. And so when I was finished with the first book novel and I knew I wasn't going to go back to it, I went to all these things on my computer, these files, and read through different things, notes that I jotted down, and then came back to that one, and I was like, that's the one. I think I should explore this. And so there you
And
go.
I think I neglected to ask the most important question, like, where is this photographer and does she know you wrote this book? Because I feel like if she does, you should move. I just want to put that out there. I think you should move, change your address.
Well, so here's the thing about that photographer. She gave me the initial idea, which is there is no real color. The character is not based on her. I can't say that any aspect of it other than that is based on her. But I took it, it got me thinking about that person and the person who is able to lie to themselves so much and see what they want to see and have no boundaries between imagination and reality, and really just blur those so that they kind of disappear.
Right. I really love that as an idea, and I think it's extremely compelling and very resonant in like so many contexts. But I just think it's such it's just an interesting idea to play with, and interesting that you started from that place, in creating the story rather than, again, I think that sometimes people who are non-writers don't understand that's where your spark came from, and it kind of not unrelated, but it that's not necessarily the very first thing that you would think of having read the book, that immediately you'd be thinking maybe more about the mystery and about kind of the page turning aspect. And I think it's really fascinating that's and I think that's where the depth of the book comes from, right? Like the fact that was your starting place rather than a plot or something like that.
Oh, well, thank you. That, like, I think what I'm looking for when I start a book is like, this person, what makes this person tick? Like, who is this person on a kind of a very deep level? And then, and that character can kind of help me figure out what the story is, who the other people are, and what the situation is.
Right. And I think if you always have that to ground you, then I think it again creates a real spine in the book, that it's very satisfying, and like whatever happens with your plot. I think if your characters or your spine in that way, like creates a depth, I think that's the best, right, of like literary mysteries like yours. I think, find that place in between. So I think that's
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you have any, having kind of been down this road a bit yourself, do you have advice that you'd want to share with this people? Because I know that I watched many of these things before when I was writing my 5 unpublished books. So do you have advice for writers out there?
Well, one thing I would say is that you have to, at least this is my own experience, you have to accept that you're going to write a lot of bad pages. Even within one book, you're probably going to write a lot of bad pages. And don't criticize those bad pages, because they're almost necessary in order to get to the good pages. So it's not a waste of time. That's something that so this is how I approach it, and that's something that I tell myself, which is I'm just going to keep writing this, and it's going to be bad until it's not. and not be judging it.
Yeah, no, I think that is like the single best piece of advice any writer can give, any aspiring writer, because I think the thing that stops people most is they start and then they're like, this is terrible.
This
and I'm
is
like,
terrible.
"Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's terrible." Like, right, that's
Yeah, it's gonna be
terrible.
yeah, it's always terrible.
Right.
And yeah, so that's like a given that it's going to be terrible. So
And
it
you
has nothing to do with what the final product's going to be.
Right. And you can't fix what doesn't exist. So like you first have to just,
Right.
make it be there. And again, I think that's also emblematic of being, if you're a writer that does an outline, that's simply really just part of the process rather
Yeah.
than, but you do, the advice I give when I was talking to high school students, I was like, lower your standards. Like,
Yeah.
hey, way low, and know that no one's going to see it. Because I think I think a lot of people, you're picking up books off the shelves, and it's hard to know just how many rounds of revisions. I mean, before you even submit it, like
Yeah.
to and work with them. So was there anything about, once you did sell a book, was there anything about kind of the publishing process that was surprising to you, having your first and this part of the process? Because then it's out in the world, and that is like a whole different thing. There's the editorial process, but there's also the process of having your book out there.
Well, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that my book was published, and just grateful. And like you, I had the experience of my first book not being published. So I know that it doesn't always happen, and I know how lucky I am. It was a weird time because it was during the pandemic that my agent, we sent this around. Really, it was the first week of the everything shutting down. And so I was so scared that it would, that would have some kind of bad effect on whether the book would sell or not. And I'm so grateful that it didn't, and that everything went really well. And it would be nice to have in-person events. There's something that I sort of wish that was possible, to have more in-person events. But because this all happened at the beginning of the pandemic, I really got used to that idea. Like, I got used to the idea that I might not have any, I might not go into stores and have in-person signings and stuff like that. So yeah, I kind of came to terms with that. And I have been driving cross country over the last month with my children and my husband, and going into a lot of bookstores and signing books and meeting booksellers and owners. And that's been a thrill. So that's been really nice that I had that chance to do it.
Well, I'm glad that you did that to make up for it, because I will say that I had a book come out in the pandemic, and I've had books come out not in the pandemic. And so it is different. And you gain something by the online virtual events, and they've been such a gift, and to be able to reach people who aren't in the immediate area or can't make it to the event and all that. And I think that's been this incredible thing. But I'm excited for you and your next book when you get to go to I get to do in-person events, because there is something special about that too. And to be able to meet readers face to face, which leads to my next question, which is, are you at work on another book? And you have to tell us all about it, so everybody who came today can get the first sneak peek about
it. I'm working on another book, but it's too early for me to share anything about it. I wish that I had more to share. I don't have anything. Like, soon I'll be able to, but.
Well, it's good. I have to say, you've mastered the art of suspense. So now we're all going to stay in suspense about what the next book is about. So I just think this is all part of it's just part of your game, Mary. It's just keeping us on the edge of our seats. So the kind of last question I have is, I know both your mother and your stepdad are actors, and so we're very much in the public eye. And the book has this, again, this idea of being viewed, I guess, from the outside, and having other people construct your narrative for you, right?
Right.
I wonder to what extent that played a part in the crafting of the story, or maybe you could just talk about how that informed, I don't know, your work as a writer or this story in particular.
Well, so my mother passed away 11 years ago, and my stepfather passed away this year, but they were both, my mother was Dixie Carter, my stepfather, Hal Holbrook. They were both actors in the public eye. And I did not think about this really while I was writing the book, but looking at it after the fact, there is something about Amelia that's like this sort of celebrity kind of, she has a aura around her, and Delta perceives her the way someone might perceive a celebrity, like not, it's not exactly real. It's not grounded. It's an idea or an abstraction of what someone is that isn't grounded in reality. So that it's possible that my experience having a mother and a stepfather who are well known, sort of filtered in there without my realizing it.
And so if there's one, I said it was gonna be my last question, but I'm adding one. So if there's one thing that you hope, is there something that you hope that readers walk away from this book with? And I don't mean like the moral of the story, although it could be that, but sometimes you just want people to walk away with a question, or maybe even what you walked away with when you were writing it. Do you have something like that you have in mind or had in mind when you're writing the book?
The best thing that has made me happy is when readers have said that they were thinking about the book days later. So I guess more than one particular question, that I'm so flattered that anyone is thinking about the book days later, but that I guess would be a goal or a hope that they were in whatever aspect of it.
Well, absolutely. And the book is absolutely thought-provoking. So I'm not surprised that you're hearing that. So your book is a pleasure. It was great talking to you. I think that there are probably questions that Joel of the Brooklyn Public Library, who's much more tech savvy than me, is going to jump back in, I think.
Yep.
And do them for us.
Yeah, we have a few. The one was the Straub family could be seen as victims, but there could be another point of view on that. How did you want the Straubs, especially Amelia, to be seen?
Oh, I did not want them to be seen as victims. I really wanted it to be somewhat balanced with the Straubs and with Delta to a certain degree, but the Straubs really bring their problems on themselves to a large degree, and they're flawed in a different way than Delta is, but they are definitely flawed characters.
And then one question came in about what you read. Oh, I guess the second one's coming in now. But what if you had to reduce to one or two books that you read before writing The Photographer that were indispensable to how you wrote it? What are some of your favorites that you might have gone back to then? And while you think, here's another one on that. Did you read novels, in particular suspense fiction, when you were writing the book, or did you prefer to read very different genres? These are two questions that came in that are very similar, so you can tackle them at once.
Well, The Talented Mr. Ripley, I did read while I was writing it. And I had read it before, but then I reread it. And there is a similar vibe, maybe. The character kind of creating this fake identity and trying to insert themselves into a family, and so that might be the one that comes to mind most readily.
Great. And then Sarah asked, about the setting in New York and Brooklyn elements and how you got comfortable getting to the real neighborhoods.
Oh, sorry, wait, could you repeat it one more time?
Yeah, I just, Sarah writes, curious about the setting and New York, Brooklyn elements and how how she felt comfortable getting to the real neighborhoods, getting those elements in, I suppose.
Oh, well, I live in Brooklyn, and so I, do feel very comfortable talking about Brooklyn, like I have a sense of it. And in terms of the Straub's particular house, I walked around looking at townhouses, trying to decide which one was theirs or which one looked to me like it was probably theirs. And I did so I did that for the exterior of it. And then I did some of the same kinds of things online, looking at photos of townhouses in Brooklyn and choosing one that felt closest to the Straub's. But then I would add, I added other, it wasn't 100% that house, but I added a few other little things. So I did research to, figure out where they lived and everything like that.
Great. And then I'll just do two more. One came in over the Zoom chat. It's a wonderful book, Mary Dixie. This kind of gets back to some of the questions from Kimberly about craft, but specifically, what did writing this book teach you about craft? If finishing is your hardest, what strategies did you come up with to deal with those difficulties of finishing it?
To deal with finishing it. I would just make myself sit at the computer for a certain number of hours a day. And I didn't exactly write to a word count each day. I know some writers do that, but I would make myself sit there for a certain number of hours each day and whatever I wrote, but I would at least be trying for that period of time. And then the other thing is that when I was really trying to finish the book, I had to let certain things go, like certain things that, household things or, other kinds of responsibilities, or, family obligations, things like that. I had to prioritize the book a little bit and put it in front of those other things, at least for that period of time, to really push through to the end.
Okay, great. And we've got a compliment to Kimberly's exceptional, insightful questions. It made me realize, is there a dream conversation that you haven't yet had on your ongoing book tour, a co-conversant who might get to Kimberly's level in another part of the country?
A dream conversation that I'm hoping for?
Yeah.
Well, I did love my conversation with Kimberly, so I don't know. It would be nice to be in a bookstore and talk to readers that just, that have read it, and I do get some people online saying nice things about the book or, comments about the book, and that's really wonderful and gratifying. But it would be nice to shake hands with someone who enjoyed the book. That would be a very satisfying moment, I think.
And finally, one last question from Facebook, and thank you again as we close out, Kimberly and Mary Dixie, for this wonderful conversation. Given your acting background, are there incipient or less than incipient plans to turn this into a TV show or a film?
Well, I have wonderful news, which is that I did sell the TV rights.
Congrats.
And it has not been announced, so I'm not supposed to give any details about who's working on it, but I'm thrilled, and I have utter faith that it's going to be excellent, and I will share more as soon as I can.
That sounds once again, a master stroke of thriller writing to end there. We'll hold on and wait to hear more about that. Well, Kimberly and Mary Dixie, thank you again for being here with us. Congratulations on all the praise that the photographer is getting, Mary Dixie. And we can't wait to have you both back for your next books at Brooklyn Public Library. To everyone in the audience, thanks for being here on a fairly hot summer night in Brooklyn, I'm told. And we hope you stay in touch with us. We have well, a concert that's going on right now in the plaza that you might catch a bit of, I'm not sure. And ongoing concerts on the plaza. Cinema Ephemera is blasting on the facade. And we also have a climate book club called Climate Reads. All the books are about climate change. And next week, we're talking the veins of the ocean with some really smart environmentalists and writers and readers. So please join us for that. You can find all of these once again at BPL Presents, the suffix for our website and our social media. And if you missed the beginning of this, you can watch it on our Facebook page at BPL Presents. So again, Kimberly, Mary Dixie, audience folks, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank
Thank you, Kimberly.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
I'm thrilled to get to talk to you, and I'm a huge fan of yours.
Oh, well, thank you. This was great. And thanks to Joel and the Brooklyn Public Library for hosting. It was a great event.
Yes. Thank you to the Brooklyn Public Library, too.
Thanks again. Good night, everyone.
Right.